G'day guys, welcome to this exclusive online collab. I'm here with Rachel and Jamin. My name's Chris and we're here to talk to you about creating effective promos. Rachel's going to talk to you about broadcast producing and James is going to be talking to you about creative and editing and directing some of our promos, and I'm going to chat to you guys about strategy and creative. So yeah, take us away, Rachel.
Cool. So thanks for joining our online conference. We're going to just have a look at a promo that I put together along with a volunteer actually, and these guys worked on the campaign as well. It's for season 1 of a show that we did on channel called Now with Natalie, and it's a 1-minute broadcast promo. Enjoy it.
What do you do in those moments when it's more than you can handle? As upset as I'll get at the beginning, the perspective that I always have to take every time is that it obviously wasn't God's plan.
I was constantly wondering, why am I here? It's more to life than number one.
You glorify me because I play basketball. That's no reason to glorify anybody.
There's no title, there's no salary that can evaluate my worth.
The world is waiting for you. You've been called and created to be an encourager. It's time to get up and go.
Purpose is a thread that you can tie to a lot of different things. I'm just convicted of who my Savior is and why I'm here.
Cool, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to talk you through a few principles of making broadcast television promos kind of based off of some of what you saw there. So first thing being timing and structure, super important. I think probably all of us have been in a situation where we've just got stuck into an edit and you can create something that's really beautiful and that you become really attached to, and then you realize you've spent 50 seconds out of your 1 minute on like one element of what you need to convey. It's not fun, it's not easy to pare it back from there, and people can really tell when you've rushed certain parts during the edit. It really comes across. So what we did with something like that was broke down how much time we needed. Okay, we need to shine a light on each of these guests. We want to give them equal time. We also need to do a call to action end slate at the end so people actually know when and where to watch the show. So breaking it down that way in advance allows you to go and look for quotes that are actually a decent amount of time and do everything you need to do and not pour too much into one aspect. So pulling apart the structure in advance and timing it out is super key. Then aesthetic. So I would always say simple done well is way better than complex not executed very well. So stick within your abilities in terms of team and skill and time. You know, there will be times when you can experiment and go crazy and have fun, but if you often with promoting, and particularly in a broadcast environment, you don't have that luxury. So I would say do what you know how to do well and stick with that. Stick with the branding around a show. So most of the time when you're promoting something, it's got existing text like fonts, looks, color palettes, all that sort of thing, maybe even imagery. Stick within that, because a really strong way to promote something is to have a consistent, strong brand.
Yeah.
We always draw on different inspirations. You're big on Pinterest boards. And you...
Yeah, I'm all over Pinterest, Behance.
Yeah.
Just depends.
So and then there's obviously if you're more of a paper crafty sort of person, you create a physical board. But my point is kind of have multiple inspirations.
Yeah.
So broadcast, it's particularly important to, have accountability and a lot of integrity around not copying other people's work, which is really hard because there's great stuff out there, but you've got something great to say too, and you're hopefully working with a great product. So I would suggest just drawing on multiple inspirations and then returning to them and comparing your work so that you know how close it is to something that you've drawn from. And get other people's perspective on that. Sound is hugely important for promos. Sometimes we get really caught up in the visuals, and obviously that's a major thing, but sound can add a lot. So with a promo, you're trying to often create multiple scenes. Now with Natalie, we had Natalie in New York, Natalie in LA, Natalie at the beach with all the different guests on the basketball court. And so we really wanted to convey kind of the breadth and the bigness of that show, and you're doing that really quickly. So you can do that visually, but you can also transport people from one setting and one scene to another, like with sound. So if you've got that New York street atmos, you're instantly taking somebody there, and you can maybe just see the shoes walking along the sidewalk. So sound is really important. It can also help text to really stand out. When you're making promos, you want that time, that name, that person's name, that show name to really land and be memorable. So a bit of a sound effect can really help you out there. It can also help you with music transitions. So I think the difference between an average and a great promo is often made by the music. It'll set the pace, it'll set the tone and the theme, and you don't want to just have like one consistent track going throughout the whole thing. It might keep you entertained and it might have a bit of momentum, but you actually need to take the audience from A to B. You need to go somewhere with it. So have a bit of fun chopping up tracks. Sometimes you can just use one track with multiple kind of moods and paces, and sometimes you actually need to bring in multiple tracks. I think we do stuff like just on a practical level, like have art list subscriptions and things like that, as well as our own composers. There's heaps of good options out there for like good music subscriptions. I think Music Bed's awesome as well. So sound is really important. A lot of promos are voiceover driven. So the one I've shown you today is not, but you will notice on television a lot of things are voiceover driven. Always do a guide VO and time it out if you're doing that. But you can often get away with doing something pretty powerful in terms of storytelling without a voiceover. So just work out like whether you need it and what you want to say. And how much you want to give too. Like sometimes you just got to be really informational, but work with, your pastor or your boss or your creative director, whoever's giving you the vision, and work out how much you need to spoon feed people. And sometimes it's better just to give them a taste and let them, these days people can Google whatever they want and get the info.
Yeah.
Messaging. So be careful with original content. Like I remember there was one time when I had created a show and I knew as the producer that there was a word in someone's sentence that was really important and that person wasn't happy with the sentence without that word. And then in a promo, it got cut out because it didn't seem important. And luckily I caught it and was like, actually, that changes the messaging of that. So be really careful that you're staying true to the content. I mean, sometimes, I guess if you work in commercial TV, they tend to twist things a bit. So it depends on your context. But particularly in a church context, and particularly if you're working with people's stories, be super careful just to do that justice and maintain the spirit behind it. I think as well, work with producers. So when we did the Now with Natalie campaign, like you hadn't worked on the show, so it was fresh to you.
Yeah.
And the volunteer I was working with, she hadn't had a lot to do with it either, but we had kind of had our heads in it for like months. Yeah. So it's different. Sometimes you've worked on the actual product, sometimes you haven't. But make sure you're getting that info from those people. I think there's benefits to having fresh eyes and not being so immersed in it, but there's also like a wealth of knowledge and experience from the people who have worked on it. So make sure you're drawing on that. Yeah, technical specs. So get the technical specs if you can. Unfortunately, they're not always handed to you and you do have to dig around a bit. So do your research and make sure that you're setting yourself up well so that you haven't created this beautiful promo and then you're having to like change it and manipulate it, or it gets stretched or cut off or whatever. Like nothing worse, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So make sure you get your technical specs. Often with promos too, you'll be getting assets from different places. So check your frame rates in advance. There's nothing worse than like we watch our promos through on a broadcast monitor before they go ahead, and it sucks when you see that it's like jittery or it's skipping or whatever because you haven't checked things like your frame rates and all that sort of stuff. So be thinking about that in the midst of your creativity. And then just as final thoughts and approach, I'd say if you can, know what you're making before you jump into it. Give yourself some space. Like do what you need to do to get creative and to really immerse yourself in it. Be willing to let go of your ideas in promos, there's high turnover. You're often serving someone else's vision. The likelihood is if you have a good idea and it doesn't get taken, you can just stick it in your pocket for next time, which is super handy. But yeah, don't be too attached to stuff. Don't take it personal. Be willing to let stuff go. I think there's no like one rule about how to make a promo either. So work with your strengths, start where you want to start, and yeah, enjoy it. Now, Jamin, you're going to talk us about conference promo.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rach. I thought I'd just talk through some of the process in putting together the Hillsong Conference 2020 campaign that I was involved in directing the promo, the video aspect of it, and I worked with Chris a little on that. So I guess I thought I'd just take you through some of the process. So before we do that, let's have a little look at it.
How gladly would we hear the dust from the breeze down, or the gale from the open sea. If the winds of the earth is so refreshing, what must a wind of heaven be?
You see, revival comes to those that want to be filled with the breath of heaven.
Breath that hovers, that creates, that overshadows. The breath of God, the wind of God, it issues from the one who mediates heaven and earth.
You see, I do know that revival is in the air. It doesn't mean it's just out there somewhere. It means it's here now. That there's a sense that God, He's wanting to do something new. He's saying this is your time.
So what I thought I'd do is talk you through the steps of putting a promo like this together. So usually we're working on the promo a year ahead, so it'll be for the following conference year. And I'll work with the art director of our comms department, Jay Argett, and there's some other comms people as well in refining the idea of what the promo is going to be about. So there's the 3 steps in the production of the promo. So there's pre-production, production, which is out shooting, whatever we need to shoot, and also post-production, pulling it all together, editing it, sound design, all that kind of thing. So part of the pre-production stage is really getting to the core of the idea that we want to communicate. So usually in the context of conference, Jay and sometimes myself will talk with Pastor Brian Houston or Pastor Bobby, depending who's involved that year, about what the theme they really want to convey in the next year's conference. Because usually there's a thought or an idea that we can kind of launch off and add visual, I guess, concepts, attaching that to the theological idea or the spiritual idea that they kind of want to, I guess, prophetically kind of want to talk about the next year. And it's really, I guess, adding legs to that and adding visuals to that and being able to communicate that to anybody who's going to watch the promo. So, that pre-production stage, the main things I'm doing in that stage is really pulling together references. So it's just pure visual references, things I've seen or I like that I've seen in the last little while and that may be appropriate for that year's theme. And it's also like looking for articles, looking for different, Bible verses and different articles on things related to that theme. Just pulling, a big wide net of ideas in that initial stage, and then slowly funneling it down until we land on the concept or idea that we really think works. I think the main thing to be doing in that stage is really working out what exactly your pastor, so if it's in the church context, or a creative director or whoever's kind of in charge of the theme, really getting down to the main idea they want to put forward. So for this conference promo, it was around this idea of the breath of God, the wind of God, the Holy Spirit. We had some scripture verses around like Acts with the day of Pentecost and things like that. So we really wanted this idea of giving visual metaphors to the wind of God, which can be difficult because, wind is in its nature is invisible, so you can only see the effects of it. But it was cool to be able to try and think of some things, the way wind affects nature, the way wind affects various things, and try and convey that through the promo to give this idea of what is essentially an invisible God or invisible spirit, but he's at work amongst us. And I guess getting down again to that core idea of Hillsong Conference, each year Hillsong Conference is about championing the local cause, the cause of the local church. So it's kind of getting around that idea, what visual metaphors can kind of sum up the church, sum up the spirit, and in a creative way that we haven't done before. So that's kind of the main things I'm working out in that initial stage. So we kind of land on this idea of the wind and then the spirit. And the main ideas you would have seen in the video was some flags idea. So we thought like the idea of flags and seeing the movement of wind could be a really cool idea. We like this idea of maybe a church organ because it's, I guess, in its imagery itself, it's got a lot of long history with Christianity. So kind of referring to the years of that have gone before us in this particular church movement and kind of incorporating that, as well as the idea, we like the idea with the church organ that a church organ is made of all these different pipes of different shapes and sizes and sounds, and it's basically a great metaphor for the church. It's made up of people of all different races, of different types of people. So one of the other main elements we have in the promo is that of the storm, and that was one of the most difficult things to capture because it's hard to on call get a storm to roll into town. But I did go out and there was a bit of wind over a couple of days just here in Sydney, and I did try a couple of times to capture it, but it just wasn't the right day. It was there's lots of failed like a handy cam kind of footage of storm that definitely didn't make it into the final promo. But what we ended up doing, which occasionally happens with promos, is we found some stock sequences and some various different video clips, and we incorporated that in a way that felt natural and felt good. And we actually ended up finding this guy on YouTube. So we were doing YouTube searches, just looking for storm footage, and we actually found this guy who's a storm chaser over in the US. So we ended up reaching out to him. He had some incredible like handheld footage of him going out very close to these storms. And we reached out to him about whether we'd be able to use one of his clips, and he was like very generous and was able to lend us one of the clips. So it actually turned out really well because something that I guess I was trying to force, we ended up being able to reach out to somebody else and incorporating that. And it felt real, it felt raw. And that sometimes happens with these promos. You do all you can to shoot your own thing, but then sometimes it can be incorporating something that already exists, but as you incorporate it with other elements, it kind of brings its own life of its own. So that was kind of cool how that all came together. So I guess the last step of putting the promo together is the editing. So once we've got all those the stuff we've shot together, we've got our track, we're pulling it all together. And with the post-production on this one, I worked with Chris in getting a visual palette together with the typography and the motion graphics. And I was wondering, Chris, if you want to talk a little bit about how we're trying to, I guess, pull that wind metaphor into the motion elements.
Yeah, sure. So I remember when we were looking through, just graphically representing through the titles, this move and wind and the breath of God. It starts off the promo with a Charles Spurgeon quote, and it's almost like the titles tell the story or add to the story that we're trying to tell. So the very first title you'll notice is quite static, but as the quote goes on, I think as it builds up and the wind comes and Dee's prophesying and there's all of this, you just start feeling the storm brewing, as I guess was what we were trying to create. The final title just moves off in the wind, and it really sets the tone for a lot of the titles you'll notice as we talk about the locations, London and Sydney, of the conference. They swipe in the wind, and there's this movement, like almost like the letters are being blown through every slate, and that was on purpose. It was definitely intentional. When we bring up stuff like the speakers and the guests that are going to be there, there's a motion to them. They're moving, and that was definitely very intentional. And we were trying to capture the movement through. We just didn't want to put up titles. Basically, we wanted them to feel like they were integrated into what we were creating, and that they were very intentionally created.
And I guess just jumping off the back of that is one thing that working with the communications department is. We're always coming back to that core message, because sometimes you get lost in, you've shot all this great stuff, or you made these great moving graphics, and it all looks very nice, but a key part of the editing process when working with Jay and the comms guys is coming back to, what are we trying to say here? What does every shot say? What does every sound in this promo say? And is it the message that we were wanting to tell? So definitely the subtle things like that, I think, play into a bigger part in stitching together the core idea that we're trying to present. So,
Absolutely.
So good. Well, thanks guys so much for joining the online conference. We really hope you enjoy the rest of it, and thanks for tuning in.